Hi, good afternoon. My name is Stephanie Figueroa, and I'm from Liberty University doing a midterm oral assignment for Psychology 516 B01. And this test consists of 5 questions that I will be answering. And the first one is, how have recent historical events affected the course of research in organizational psychology? Well, first of all, I want to start by saying that psychology is a very young field, and it really hasn't been until the past decades that it started gaining credibility and people respecting it more as a field. So definitely people have looked into research more just lately over the last few decades. But one event that really contributed to the way research is conducted in psychology was World War II. And what happened was that men being called into the military, women were needed to fulfill those roles. So this really forced the government to create a diversity in the workplace. And consequently, there was a book in 1953 that it was called Motivation and Morale in Industry. And this book really impacted psychology also because it focused on the organizational side of industrial psychology, which focuses on the environment, like factors like well-being and motivation, leadership, norms, and how that affects, like the environment in the workforce. So this book really helped, to shift the focus from the industrial side to the organizational side of it. Also, there was a development of a human relation perspective movement that it really fought to create a freedom of expression in the workforce. They argue that organizations kept employees from being creative and from lacking, to feel fulfilled in the job. So they really created this movement of freedom within the workforce, and people. This resulted in people following authority less blindly. And one last thing that I want to mention for this is globalization. Globalization really also impacted psychology because research in psychology, because there was such an increase in competition within organizations, and people had more choices, to choose where they wanted to work, and they, this just created a diversity of options and choices. So this really forced organizations to be more innovative in developing their products and their services, and also developing strategies to increase retention, of their employees. So definitely that research was very beneficial in this area for organizations to come up with successful strategies to increase retention. Also, the second question of this assignment states, describe the socialization process for graduate students in your program. Is the program successful in socializing newcomers and creating job embeddedness? Well, I want to start by saying that socialization is the process in which a newcomer is transformed into a full-fledged organizational member. And I believe this process in our program from Liberty University, it really starts with us, the students, first, when we're doing our recruitment and like researching, what university best fits our needs. And when we're looking at, once we do this, once we decide that Liberty is the right fit for us, then Liberty starts this socialization process with the admission requirements, and they go through this process of evaluating, if we also are a best fit for the university policies and standards and, their mission and all of that. So definitely once this process is done and we're accepted, they create a sense of embeddedness by sending an official letter of acceptance. And I think this letter is huge in creating that sense of embeddedness, because when you receive it, it just creates this sense of like, I'm part of this university already, like this is about to begin. So it really, by doing this official letter, personalized letter, you really create they really create that sense of embeddedness. And another thing that they do is they have advisors and staff constantly calling, and they help in diminishing the ambiguity and role conflict, and they just create accessibility of the organization to us, the newcomers. So I believe this is one of the main things why I think they are successful at socializing newcomers and creating job embeddedness, because they constantly keep you connected, and they constantly show a sense of caring and concern for the newcomers, and they even do it for the existing students. So they really send a strong message, of socializing and connecting with people constantly. The number 3 question is, how can an organization reduce or prevent work-family conflict? Work-family conflict goes 2 ways, and that means there's an incompatibility of demands where a balance is needed to be able to reduce it and to be able to handle it effectively. That means like there's a struggle of switching on and off from work and family and going back and forth. So it's a 2-way process, but there are ways that organizations can really help reduce it, and one way to do it is to provide organizational support. And with these, that means that they can redesign job. So if a job is just becoming too much on a person, or a person doesn't have maybe enough time to complete it at work, maybe they can redesign it in which they can take part of the job home, and then that way they create a balance. Also, family-friendly policies and benefits are critical in reducing work-family conflict. And with these, an example of this can be if there's a meeting, let's say after work hours, like a mandatory staff call at 7 p.m. and maybe mothers or people that have children might struggle with finding care, because usually daycares are not open after work hours. So having an organization that already takes care of that by providing a room in where children can be and allocating that time and space for them so the meeting can happen and everybody can be present, that will be creating a balance for reducing family work conflict. Also, flexibility of hours, being flexible with employees, being flexible with the scheduling, and just having that flexibility of hours, working with their employees so they can meet their needs of family, but also successfully meet the needs of their work. A second thing they can do that can help, it's supervisor support. This is, I think, one of the main ones, because having a supervisor that really acknowledges by acting and responding correctly and properly to work-family conflicts, it's huge. And one of the ways supervisor can do it is by being open to listen to their employees' situations and offering a plan of action and offering solutions and helping them overcome the conflict, so there's a balance, so they can be successful. So just showing involvement, and a sense of caring for their employees, is huge in providing that supervisor support. Personally, I remember one day that I had a struggle with daycare and stuff, and my supervisor just stared at me like, Anne, like, figure it out. And it just really takes a toll on you. So having that supervisor support, it's so much better to reduce work family conflict. And last thing they can do is individual personal coping, and that's more on you, like finding things that can help you cope with the family work conflict, like going to yoga or going to a time management training, or if budget allows, asking for less hours. But this is really hard because in occasions this might be hard because a supervisor needs to be willing to do that, and if sometimes people are understaffed, so that might not happen. But yeah, those are things that can happen. The fourth question is, imagine if you have been asked to develop a performance assessment program for employee development. What techniques could you use to evaluate employee job performance? There are many techniques you can use when assessing job performance, but it's important to define job performance. And this is behaviors that an employee engages while at work that contribute to an organizational goal. And there are rarely direct measures of these, but it's important to distinguish between two dimensions of job performance in order to measure them correctly: intra-role job performance and extra-role job performance. Intra-role refers to the core tasks of one's job, and extra-role is just contextual, so more of those soft skills that help you be completely successful at your job, such as motivation. The Murphy's List provides 8 techniques in which you can measure correctly job performance, and this will be with paper and pencil tests, global or task ratings, symbolic high fidelity simulation, and on-site, off-site, hands-on training. So there are several ways, but the most common that people use is ratings. It's always good to know also that like with any measurement, there's room for error, so it's always good to know to account for that error. So a possible example of some errors could be bias in ratings, the standards, and also like allocating adequate and enough time to observe a person's performance. So not rushing in the process might be beneficial to avoid that error. And the last question is, what are some possible common organizational constraints, and how could they lead to counterproductive behavior? The counterproductive behavior are volitional acts that harm an organization or people in it. They can be directly or indirectly. The most common are withdrawal, which is attempts to leave work, such as being late, leaving early, or being absent. Abusive of others, such as being rude, and social undermining. Less common are drug, alcohol consumption, theft, and sex harassment. But there are some constraints that can lead to these behaviors, and one of them is person-based traits. Sometimes people bring into work some traits that might lead to counterproductive behavior. This is why the screening process and organizational and industrial psychologists are very, very helpful in this recruitment process, because we can identify those traits that might lead to those behaviors, and some of them can be narcissism, lack of self-control, lack of conscientiousness, and anger. So for example, a person that lacks self-control, they might be impulsive to react to a policy change, and they might not like it, so the next day they might just not show up for work, or they might just leave work. So this is an example of how a personality trait can lead to counterproductive work behavior. A second constraint could be situation-based, and these are variables that play a role in allowing these counterproductive behaviors. And some of these variables can be opportunity, such as having enough time and the means to be lazy at work, or to engage in non-work related activities such as just having downtime to be at the computer and engage on Facebook, and not having a supervisor that is really paying close attention to your break time, and you're taking 5 minutes extra. So opportunity to do these things will create counterproductive behavior. Stress, these can really impact counterproductive behavior. So just being stressed can create a lot of negative emotions that might result in bad behavior at work. And also injustice, seeing the supervisor show favoritism or being demeaning, taking credit for your work, or being too critical. These are things that can really lead people to just wanting to hurt a specific person, such as the supervisor or the organization as a whole. So all these things are important to take into account, to know what to do and how to avoid these counterproductive work behaviors. So this is my assignment completed, and thank you for your time, and I hope we can each learn a little bit. Thank you.